I overheard my own daughter scoff and say, "She's nothing but a burden." My heart clenched, as if crushed in an iron fist. Those words uttered by the very child I had raised with my own blood and tears for 35 years ripped my soul apart. I stood frozen in the corner of the kitchen, clutching my trembling hands to keep from collapsing. In a flash, memories returned. Emma once hugging me tightly, whispering, "Mom, I'll never leave you." Yet now, a single mocking laugh had reduced all of it to ashes. I didn't know what hurt more, the ingratitude of my daughter, or the calculating, complicit look in my son-in-law John's eyes as he nodded along. Every sacrifice, every drop of sweat I had poured out on these frail shoulders had turned into nothing but a cruel joke inside the very house I had built with my own hands. And at that very moment, another horrifying secret began to surface. A truth so devastating it would shake my entire family. A truth I had never dared imagine. My name is Frances. I am 70 years old. At an age when most people should be resting, surrounded by the care of their children and grandchildren, I find myself feeling like an unwanted guest in the very home I once poured my sweat into building. After my husband passed away when I was just in my early 30s, I dedicated my entire life to raising Emma, my only daughter. I never remarried, afraid she might feel neglected, afraid she would suffer the pain of a stepmother and stepchild household. Every dollar I earned, every meal I skipped, was for one single dream: that Emma would live a life of comfort, free from the struggles her mother had endured. And I did it. Emma grew up beautiful, excelled in her studies, and eventually married John, a man who seemed respectable, well off, and kind. On her wedding day, Emma held my hand, tears brimming in her eyes, and said, "Mom, from now on you'll never be lonely again. John and I will take care of you for the rest of your life." I cried from happiness, believing I had finally found peace after so many storms. Trusting her completely, I handed over all the house deeds and the savings book for Emma to keep. I thought, these assets mean nothing to me now, except as something to leave for her. I've lived long enough. As long as Emma and John love me and give me a warm home, I will be content. But as the days passed, I slowly began to realize a painful truth. I was becoming the extra person in this family. At mealtimes, they would talk to each other, and I would sit quietly, just listening. Whenever I tried to join in, John would nod absent-mindedly, while Emma stayed glued to her phone. Not a hug, not even the touch of a hand like in the old days. Then came that night when I overheard Emma's laughter, followed by the words, "She's nothing but a burden." That was when it struck me, everything I had loved, everything I had believed in, had turned out to be nothing but a weight to the very daughter I once swore I would give my life to protect. I still remember the day Emma was born. It was pouring rain, our little house leaking from every corner, and there I was, cradling my tiny baby in trembling arms. People used to say, "A child born in a storm will grow strong for life." I believed it, and I believed even more that Emma was the only reason I had to keep going. I worked endlessly to raise her. During the day, I cleaned houses for wealthy families. At night, I stayed up sewing until my back ached. My hands grew calloused, my back bent with the years. But every time Emma smiled, it was all worth it. There were nights when Emma burned with fever, and I sat holding her in my arms, singing softly to lull her to sleep. Once, when she opened her eyes and asked, "Mom, are you tired?" I laughed, hiding my tears, and whispered, "How could I ever be tired? As long as you're healthy, I'll have strength forever." I never once bought myself a new dress, but I saved every penny to buy Emma the nicest school uniforms. I never stepped foot in a movie theater, but I would walk miles just to take her to her language classes. All of my dreams were wrapped inside hers. I still remember the day Emma got accepted into college. She threw her arms around me, sobbing, "Mom, I'll study hard and earn money so you won't have to suffer anymore." Those words became my only motivation to keep working, to keep carrying the weight of life on my shoulders. And while she studied far from home, I sent her money every month, even if it meant I survived on watery porridge for days. I told myself, it's okay. Emma will grow up. One day she'll understand. But standing here now, with her words, "She's nothing but a burden," echoing in my head, I feel all those past sacrifices slicing into me like sharp knives. I once believed Emma was the greatest pride of my life. But now she has become its deepest wound. After that night, when I heard Emma say, "She's nothing but a burden," I started paying closer attention to their actions. What I had once naively thought was just a busy couple soon revealed itself in unsettling details. They often sat together in the living room, whispering when they thought I had gone to bed. Once, as I passed by, I overheard John say, "If we could get the house transferred sooner, everything would be so much easier. The old lady won't be around much longer anyway." Emma didn't argue. She just stayed silent, and that silence pierced my heart like a knife. I began to look back and realized all the signs had been there all along. From the moment Emma asked me to hand over the property deed just to keep it safe, to when John urged me to open a joint bank account. Back then, I thought they were simply worried about my future. But looking at it now, it was all part of a carefully laid plan. One afternoon, I walked into John's study and saw papers scattered across the desk. He quickly tried to hide them, forcing a fake smile. "Need something, Mom?" I was just going over a few documents. But I had already caught a glimpse of the bold words at the top of the page. Property transfer agreement. My heart pounded wildly. Cold sweat trickled down my back. I started checking through the cabinets and soon discovered that many of my late husband's keepsakes were gone. When I asked about them, Emma replied casually, "Mom, you're old already. What's the point of keeping all that junk? I sold them to clear up space in the house." I was speechless. Those keepsakes were pieces of my soul, yet she treated them like trash. From then on, I kept my suspicions to myself, living quietly while trying to listen and observe more. And then, one evening, I overheard John on the phone with a friend. His voice was low but smug. "Just a few more months and I'll have all the money in my hands. She's worthless now." His laughter echoed down the hallway. I stood trembling behind the door, tears spilling down my face, not knowing whether it was from anger or despair. I had sacrificed my entire life, but in the eyes of my daughter and son-in-law, I was nothing more than a burden, an obstacle standing in the way of their greed. At that moment, I realized the true tragedy had only just begun. I began to watch more closely and saw how John was slowly manipulating Emma with subtle pressure. At first, it was just gentle suggestions, like, "Honey, your mom's assets will be yours eventually anyway. If we transfer the title now, it'll be easier to manage and avoid disputes later." At first, Emma hesitated, but John's eyes always carried that cold, calculating look, pushing her further and further. One evening, as I passed the living room, I saw John hand Emma a stack of papers. "All you need to do is sign. It's just paperwork. That way, if anything ever happens to your mom, we won't have to deal with complicated procedures. I've taken care of everything." Emma held the pen, her hand trembling. I could see the struggle in her eyes. But then John grabbed her hand, pressing the pen against her fingers. "Trust me. This is for our future." I stood hidden in the shadows, my chest aching. My daughter, the one who once hugged me and promised never to abandon me, was now letting her husband lead her down a path of betrayal. A few days later, Emma came home with another stack of papers and said to me, "Mom, can you sign these for me?" "It's just some bank paperwork." Suspicious, I asked, "What kind of paperwork needs my signature?" Emma glanced at John, then forced a smile. "It's just to confirm that you agree to let me manage your savings account. I'm worried that when you get older, if anything happens, it'll be hard to take care of." I hesitated, but Emma pushed the pen and paper right in front of me. John stood behind me, his cold eyes burning into my back. My hand trembled as I signed, feeling as though my very soul was being stolen away. The next morning, I realized the savings book in my safe was gone. I asked Emma about it, and she replied without a trace of guilt. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm keeping it. From now on, you don't have to think about it anymore." I was choking on my words, unable to speak. The very daughter I had sacrificed my whole life for was now locking away my future in her and her husband's hands. John's true colors gradually came to light. He often said things like, "Old people should just know their place. Stop trying to hold on to money. You should leave everything for us to handle." Every word felt like a knife cutting into my dignity. The house that had once been filled with laughter between mother and daughter now felt like a cage. I was trapped, stripped of the right to control my own life. And the worst part was that Emma, my daughter, stood by in silence, complicit in everything John did. I knew then that the real storm had not yet arrived, and when it came, I would have to face it with all the pain of a mother betrayed. After I had foolishly signed those papers, everything began to change quickly. Letters from the bank that used to arrive at the house suddenly stopped coming. I waited and waited, but the usual statements never showed up. One day, I caught the mailman at the gate, and before I could step outside, Emma rushed ahead, snatched the letters, and stuffed them into her purse as if nothing had happened. I asked her, "Emma, was there any mail for me?" Without even looking at me, she replied curtly, "Nothing important, Mom." Her short, dismissive answer chilled me to the bone. It didn't stop there. One by one, the keepsakes in the house began to vanish. My husband's old pendulum clock, the only thing left from our hardest days, was gone. The porcelain tea set, a wedding gift from my in-laws, disappeared as well. When I asked, Emma said matter-of-factly, "Why hold on to all that old junk? I sold it. The house looks neater now, and it gives us a little extra cash." I swallowed my protests, but John cut in coldly. "Mom, let us handle these things. This house is under our management now. You just need to rest." I felt as though I was being erased bit by bit, right inside the home I had built with my own hands. And one late night, I quietly passed through the living room and saw John sitting with a stranger. Papers covered the table, numbers scribbled all over them. His voice was hushed, but I heard every word. "Selling off the stuff in this house will bring in a decent amount. A few more months, once the house is in my wife's name, it'll all be settled." The man laughed, and John raised his glass in a toast. I stood hidden in the dark, my nails digging into the wall until they bled. In that moment, the truth was laid bare before me. To him, I wasn't family. I was just an obstacle, something standing in the way of his greed. And Emma, my daughter, where was she in all this? The next day, I watched her smiling happily beside John, and my heart broke. She was no longer the little girl who once promised never to leave me. Now she was his ally, a willing part of the scheme to strip me of everything. I realized it wasn't just my possessions being stolen. The sacred bond between mother and daughter was being sold off piece by piece, just like those keepsakes that vanished from our home without a trace. And then a thought began to rise within me. If I kept silent, I would be erased my memories, my possessions, even my very existence. One weekend afternoon, John hosted a small party, inviting a few friends over. I stayed in my room, trying to avoid the noise, but the door, left slightly ajar, delivered yet another deep wound straight into my heart. Between the clinking of glasses and bursts of laughter, I heard John's voice clearly. "Just wait, everyone. The old lady won't be around much longer. When she's gone, the house, the money, everything will be mine." The table erupted in laughter. Another man even jeered, "You're lucky, John. A pretty wife, a big house, and a mother-in-law who comes with a fortune." John roared with laughter, not the least bit offended, even raising his glass proudly. "That's right.
I'm a lucky man.
Just a little more time and everything will be wrapped up neatly. I stood frozen behind the door. My head spun, my chest tightened until I could barely breathe. His words, "The old lady won't be around much longer," stabbed into me like an icy blade. In his eyes, my life was nothing more than a countdown, ticking toward the moment when he could finally claim everything I had bled to build. I clenched the edge of the door until my fingertips bled, fighting back sobs. In my mind, I saw Emma as a child again, running toward me with worn-out shoes, laughing, "Mom, one day I'll buy you a big house." And now, she sat beside her husband, silent, letting him treat me like a burden waiting to be discarded. That night, I couldn't sleep. Alone in my room, surrounded by the emptiness of lost keepsakes and faded laughter, I wept into my pillow. I asked myself, where did I go wrong? How could a lifetime of sacrifice end in such betrayal? But beneath the pain, a new fire began to burn. For the first time in many years, I felt something stronger than resignation. I whispered into the dark, "No, this isn't over. You will pay for this." That was the moment I decided I had to fight back. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A few weeks later, my extended family gathered for a big celebration, my aunt's wedding anniversary. Nearly everyone was there, laughter and chatter filling the elegant banquet hall. Emma and John arrived hand in hand, the picture of a perfect couple. Dressed impeccably, smiling sweetly, they drew admiration from all sides. Relatives whispered about how lucky Emma was to marry such a successful, charming husband. I sat quietly in a corner, watching the charade as if from behind a curtain. Every word of praise for John tasted bitter in my throat. None of them knew the man he truly was. As the evening reached its peak, John stood, raising his glass to give a toast. His voice was strong, his manner confident, every inch the model husband. But to me, each word was another blade twisting in the wound. I knew, if I didn't speak now, I might never get another chance. Leaning on my cane, I rose to my feet. The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward me. A few whispered, "What's Mother Frances doing?" I drew a deep breath and spoke, my voice raspy but firm. "You all see a dutiful son-in-law, a devoted husband, but the truth is very different." The air grew heavy. John froze for a moment, then quickly recovered, flashing a polite smile as he stepped toward me. "Mother, what are you saying? You must be tired. Let me help you sit down and rest." I pushed his hand away and stared him down. "Do you think I don't know? You and Emma took all the property deeds and the savings book. You told your friends I won't live much longer, that soon everything will be yours." The room exploded in murmurs. Emma's face turned pale. John stiffened, then let out a forced laugh. "Please, everyone, don't listen to her. She's old, confused. She imagines things." My body trembled, but my voice held steady. "If I'm lying, then why have so many keepsakes vanished from my home? Why have I never seen a single bank letter? Why did I hear you with my own ears call me a burden?" The hall fell into dead silence. Suspicion flickered in the relatives' eyes. John tried to maintain his smile, but his hand clenched so tightly around his glass that his knuckles turned white. At that moment, I knew I had struck the first blow. The mask was beginning to tear. John set his glass down with a sharp clink. His smile faded into a cold sneer. "Mother, I don't know where you heard such nonsense, but I won't allow you to slander me in front of everyone." Emma rushed over, grabbing my arm as if to stop me. "Mom, why are you saying these things? John takes care of you every single day, and now you humiliate him in front of the family?" I looked at Emma. Her eyes glistened with tears, but there was more anger than sorrow in them. I wanted to shout, "I'm not lying, Emma. I heard it with my own ears, saw it with my own eyes." But the words stuck in my throat. Relatives began whispering. One cousin shook her head, murmuring, "Maybe Aunt Frances is just getting paranoid with age." But another narrowed his eyes at John. Still, what she's saying, it doesn't sound entirely impossible. Didn't I hear the house was already transferred to Emma's name? John jumped in quickly, his voice smooth, rehearsed. Yes, we transferred the house, but only because we worried about Mom's health. If anything happened, we didn't want the legal process to be complicated. That's all. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound startling the crowd. If you truly cared about me, why hide the bank letters? Why have all my keepsakes disappeared? Why did your own friends hear you boast that all my assets would soon be yours? Enough, Mother! Emma cried out, her voice breaking. You're embarrassing me. The room tensed. Some relatives frowned at me, but others now looked at John with clear doubt. Just as I felt my strength failing, a voice rose from the far end of the table. No, Emma, your mother isn't wrong. Aunt Frances is telling the truth. All eyes turned toward the speaker, my younger cousin, who worked at the local bank. He stood firmly, his face solemn. I personally saw the property transfer papers with Emma and John's names on them. The signature didn't look natural, it shook like it was forced. The documents were filed in unusual haste. I've suspected ever since. And tonight I believe Aunt Frances. The room erupted in shock. Murmurs filled the air, all eyes now fixed on John. His face hardened, beads of sweat forming at his temples. I stood there, choking on tears. For the first time in years, surrounded by lies, I felt a hand reaching out to me, a glimmer of light, proving I was not alone. After that family gathering, I knew there was no turning back. John would never leave me in peace, and Emma, my own daughter, had chosen silence, standing by his side. My heart ached, but I understood. Only the truth and the law could save me now. One morning, I quietly put on my coat and took the bus into the city. My legs trembled, my heart raced, but I kept hearing my cousin's words from that night. Aunt Frances is telling the truth. I believe her. That faith gave me strength. The lawyer's name was Mr. Miller, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes, but a calm, steady voice. He listened carefully as I told him everything from handing over the property deeds, to John hiding bank letters, to the nights I overheard his schemes. With shaking hands, I pulled from my pocket a crumpled photocopy of a property transfer contract I had once glimpsed. Mr. Miller examined it, frowning. Mrs. Frances, this signature clearly shows signs of coercion. The strokes are shaky, uneven. Very likely you were pressured or misled. Legally, this contract can be considered invalid. I stared at him, tears filling my eyes. Then, does that mean I still have a chance? He nodded firmly. Yes, but we need more evidence. Bank correspondence, witnesses, even recordings of your son-in-law's words. We have to build a full picture. For the first time in months, a spark of hope lit inside me. From that day forward, I began documenting everything. I kept scraps of paper John threw away, took photos of bank letters I found hidden in the trash, even slipped my phone into my pocket to secretly record his words every time John snapped at me. "You're old, you don't know anything. Be quiet and stay out of my way." I kept my head down, but in my pocket, my phone was quietly capturing proof. At night, I gathered everything into a thick envelope and brought it to Mr. Miller. He looked at me with newfound respect. "Mrs. Frances, you're not just a victim. You're becoming the strongest witness in this case." My voice trembled, but I managed to reply, "I'm not doing this just for myself. I'm doing it so he knows no one has the right to call a mother a burden, and no one can strip me of my life and dignity." It didn't take long for John to grow suspicious. After a few secret trips into the city, one evening as I stepped back into the house, he was already waiting in the living room. His eyes were dark, his smile twisted with menace. "Where have you been all day, Mother? Hiding something from us?" he asked, his voice calm but dripping with threat. I clutched my bag tightly. I just went out for some air." John leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. "Don't think I don't know. You're trying to betray us." "But who would believe the ramblings of an old woman? If you keep meeting with that lawyer, don't blame me for what happens. I know how to make you stay silent forever." My legs nearly gave out, but I remembered Mr. Miller's words. Don't let him see your fear. Even his threats can become evidence. Summoning every ounce of courage, I replied, "I've done nothing wrong. Only the guilty fear the truth." John's eyes flashed with cruelty. He leaned in closer, hissing, "This is your last warning. One more step, and I'll make sure you never speak again." But hidden in my pocket, my phone was already recording. Every word, every chilling threat was captured. That night, Emma came into my room, her voice heavy. "Mom, John said you've been meeting strangers. Please don't do anything to destroy this family. I don't want to lose my husband." My heart shattered. "Emma, can't you see? He's turning me into nothing." "Have you forgotten everything I did for you?" Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was cold. "Don't make me choose, Mom. I've already chosen." The door closed behind her, leaving me alone in the dark. But this time, I wasn't empty-handed. I had the recording, the weapon that could finally expose him. A week later, I returned to Mr. Miller's office, my hands trembling as I handed him a small USB drive. He plugged it in, listened, and his eyes lit up. John's voice filled the room, clear and sharp. "If you keep seeing that lawyer, don't blame me. I'll make sure you stay silent forever." Mr. Miller leaned back, his voice steady but fierce. "This is exactly what we needed. Not only does it prove intimidation, it shows intent to seize your property. We'll submit this to the court." For the first time, I felt a heavy weight lift from my chest. A few days later, John received the legal notice from Mr. Miller's office. When he came home that evening, his face no longer carried the smug arrogance I had grown used to. He slammed the papers onto the table, his voice rising with fury. "So this is your game, Mother? You really think you can win against me? You're old. Don't dream of defeating me." For once, I didn't cower. I sat upright, met his gaze, and said calmly, "I'm not fighting you. I'm simply taking back what is mine. The law, not you, will decide." His face twitched, and for a moment I saw something I had never seen in him before: fear. He began pacing the room, then suddenly slammed his hand against the table so hard the glasses rattled. "How dare you bring outsiders into our family business?" The noise echoed through the house. Emma rushed down from upstairs, alarmed. "What's going on? John, calm down." He spun toward her, shouting, "Your mother's trying to ruin everything. She's turning lawyers against me. Are you still on her side?" Emma froze, her eyes darting between us. She looked at me, then at her husband, but no words came. Swallowing back tears, I steadied my voice. "Emma, I only want to keep what belongs to me. If you still love me, then listen. Don't let him blind you anymore." But Emma lowered her eyes and stepped back toward John. He smirked, but his laugh was hollow this time. "Fine. You want the law involved? So be it. But don't think I'll be beaten so easily." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The house fell into silence. My heart pounded, but for the first time, I felt a strange new strength. The first legal strike had landed, and John was already staggering. I never imagined how quickly news would spread. After Mr. Miller filed the case, just a few days later the neighbors began whispering. Some wondered why police officers had been seen at my gate delivering documents. Others muttered, "I heard there's a lawsuit over property." At the market, I caught snatches of gossip among the vendors. "That son-in-law of Francis, he looked so polished, but I hear he's not as decent as he seems." And the daughter? To turn against her own mother? Shameful. I lowered my head, my heart aching. Yet hidden in that pain was a flicker of hope. At last, people were beginning to see the truth. Soon after, an old friend, Margaret, came to visit. She took my hands and whispered, Frances, don't be afraid. Everyone in the neighborhood is talking now. We know you're not lying. You must stand up and prove it." Her words brought tears to my eyes. All my life I had thought I was alone, but now I felt the strength of others standing with me. Meanwhile, John and Emma grew restless. John stormed into the house one evening, his face thunderous. "The whole neighborhood looks at me like I'm a criminal." "This is all your mother's fault." Emma's face was pale, her voice shaky. "Maybe we should explain to them? Tell them Mom just misunderstood?" "Shut up," John roared. "Explaining only makes it worse. The only way is to shut her up for good." I overheard those words from behind my door, but instead of fear, I felt an odd calm. For the first time in years, I realized the tide of public opinion was on my side. The very next day, a local reporter knocked on my door. "Mrs. Francis," he said, "we've heard claims that your daughter and son-in-law have taken your property. If you're willing, we'd like to tell your story." I looked into his earnest eyes, and a fire lit inside me. It's time for the world to hear my voice. I never imagined an old woman like me would one day appear in the news. But soon, the local paper ran my story with a headline that shook the community. 70-year-old mother betrayed, daughter and son-in-law accused of seizing her property. The article detailed everything I had shared, from raising Emma alone, to trusting her with my deeds and savings, to John's manipulation and threats. It even quoted Mr. Miller. "We have evidence of both intimidation and signs of financial fraud." By the next morning, my story had spread everywhere. At the market, neighbors squeezed my hand, whispering, "Francis, we support you. Don't worry, the truth always comes out." At home, though, John and Emma were like people sitting on burning coals. Wherever they went, they felt eyes following them. Passers-by would mutter at the gate, "Such a dutiful son-in-law, huh? Caring for his mother-in-law all the way to court." John's face turned purple with rage as he slammed the door shut. Emma broke down in tears. "John, everyone despises me now." At work, my colleagues look at me like I'm a traitor. John pounded the table, his voice shaking with fury. "It's all because of that old woman. Let's see how long she can handle the pressure from the media." But he was wrong. It wasn't pressure on me, it was pressure closing in on him. The following day, a TV journalist arrived at my house asking for an interview. My heart pounded as the camera pointed at me, but I no longer trembled. I spoke clearly, each word firm. "I don't ask for anything except fairness. I want to prove that a mother is never a burden unless her own children choose to treat her as one." When the interview aired, the community exploded. Hundreds of comments flooded social media. "Such ungrateful children should never be forgiven." "I hope she wins in court. Let the greedy ones pay the price." My house, once a prison where I lived in fear, now became the center of attention. But this time, the judgment was on John and Emma. John wasn't about to sit back while his reputation crumbled. The very next day, he contacted someone he knew in the media and paid for a counterstory. Soon, an article appeared online with a headline designed to twist the truth. "The Other Side: Elderly Mother Fabricates Lies, Causing Family Rift." In it, John painted himself as the devoted son-in-law. All I ever wanted was to care for my mother-in-law, but she misunderstood my intentions. Someone must be putting ideas in her head. Even Emma's name appeared, quoted as saying, "My mother has been imagining things lately. I only wanted to protect her." For a moment, some people grew confused, unsure who to believe. But John had underestimated the power of evidence. Within days, Mr. Miller released the recording I had captured, the chilling threat in John's own voice. "If you keep seeing that lawyer, don't blame me. I'll make sure you stay silent forever." The clip aired on television, John's voice echoing clear and undeniable. The community erupted. Outrage swept across the town. Online, comments poured in. "Still want to deny it? That's his voice, plain as day." A wolf in sheep's clothing. Disgusting. Neighbors pointed fingers when John walked down the street. At work, colleagues distanced themselves. Emma, crushed by public shame, wept under the weight of the judgment. One night, I overheard John shouting in the living room, his voice raw with anger. "It's all that old woman's fault. If not for her, I wouldn't be in this mess." But deep down, he knew the truth. He had dug his own grave with his greed and cruelty. The day of the trial arrived. The sky was heavy and gray, as if foreshadowing the storm to come. I put on my old coat, clutching the thick file Mr. Miller had prepared over months. My legs trembled as I walked into the courtroom, but my eyes stayed steady. John was already seated, dressed sharply in a suit, his face arranged into a mask of confidence. Beside him was Emma, my daughter, wearing a pale blue dress, her face gaunt, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights. Seeing her pierced my heart, but I reminded myself, today I cannot be weak. Today the truth must come out. The judge entered, and the session began. John's lawyer spoke first, painting me as a senile old woman inventing lies to divide her daughter's marriage. He even produced friends of John who testified, "He's always been a caring son-in-law." I sat silently, my blood boiling. Then Mr. Miller rose, his voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, we have clear evidence that the defendant, John, not only attempted to seize Mrs. Francis's property, but also threatened her safety." He played the recording. John's voice filled the courtroom. "If you keep seeing that lawyer, don't blame me. I'll make sure you stay silent forever." The room gasped. John's face drained of color. Emma lowered her head, her hands trembling. The judge struck the gavel, calling for order. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in John's eyes. He was no longer the smug man towering over me. He was cornered prey. But that was only the beginning. Mr. Miller then called a witness, my younger cousin, the bank employee. He stepped forward, speaking with conviction. "I personally saw the transfer documents placing the property under Emma and John's names. The signature looked forced, shaky. The filing was rushed. I suspected something was wrong from the start." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. John shot to his feet, shouting, "Lies! This is my family's private matter. You have no right." The judge banged the gavel again, sternly ordering him to sit. Then came another witness, Margaret, my neighbor. Her voice shook, but held firm. "I saw John hiding letters from the bank. I even overheard him tell a friend, 'The old lady won't last long. Soon everything will be mine.'" I couldn't stay silent any longer. Gasps echoed through the room. John's face turned ashen. Emma broke down in sobs, whispering, "No, no, this can't be true." But the truth was laid bare, undeniable. The courtroom grew tense, the air thick with whispers and outrage. Mr. Miller presented the final pieces of evidence, photographs of my missing keepsakes, matched with receipts from the pawn shop where John had sold them. He turned to the judge, his voice unwavering. "This is not the behavior of a loving son-in-law. This is the pattern of a man exploiting family ties to commit fraud and intimidation." Murmurs of anger rippled through the room. The judge struck the gavel, restoring order, and announced, "The court will reconvene tomorrow for the final verdict, but it is clear that the balance of evidence weighs heavily in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Francis." John slumped into his chair, his face gray and lifeless. Emma buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. For the first time in many years, I lifted my head high. I knew justice was close. The next day, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the aisles, cameras flashing. I sat in the front row, clutching my rosary with trembling hands, my heart racing between fear and hope. John entered, no longer the confident man he once was. His eyes were dark, his face lined with exhaustion. Emma followed, her hair disheveled, her eyes swollen red. I glanced at her, my chest tightening with pain, but then I remembered her words like a blade. "She's nothing but a burden." And I turned away. The judge spoke, each word echoing through the chamber. After reviewing the evidence, the recorded threats, the witness testimonies, and the bank documents, the court concludes that the property transfer was invalid, having been obtained through coercion and deceit. A murmur swept the room. I held my breath. The house and savings shall be returned to Mrs. Francis. The defendant, John, is guilty of fraud, elder intimidation, and will face legal sentencing accordingly. The gavel struck. Tears burst from my eyes, not from grief, but from relief. After so many nights of silence, the truth had finally spoken for me. John leapt up, shouting, "No! This is a conspiracy! You're all against me!" The bailiffs grabbed him, handcuffs clinking as he struggled. His eyes burned into me with hatred. "You'll pay for this, Francis. You'll regret it." But I no longer trembled. I looked him straight in the eye, calm and unflinching. Beside him, Emma collapsed onto the bench, sobbing, "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong." My heart bled, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive not so easily. She had stood by him, silent, while I was treated like nothing but a burden. The reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. Headlines would soon spread. "Justice for 70-year-old mother greedy son-in-law faces the law." I walked out of the courthouse into the midday sun, and the warmth touched my wrinkled face. For the first time in years, I felt free. Justice at last was mine. The verdict may have brought justice to me, but for John and Emma, it was only the beginning of their downfall. John, the man once praised as the golden son-in-law and admired as a polished businessman, quickly became a disgrace splashed across every newspaper. The photo of him, head bowed, wrists in handcuffs as he was led from the courtroom, spread across television and social media, shared thousands of times with scathing comments. "Imagine robbing your own mother-in-law, shameful beyond words. A man without conscience, he deserves every bit of this." His company fired him immediately. Business partners cut ties overnight. The same friends who once raised glasses with him at lavish parties now pretended they had never known him. Society turned its back. Behind bars, John had nothing left, not wealth, not pride, not even freedom. At first he tried to act defiant, shouting his innocence, but the mocking laughter of his cellmates soon surrounded him. "That's the guy who leeched off his mother-in-law. The most pathetic man I've ever seen." Each day he shrank a little more. At night he huddled in a corner, muttering to himself, "It's all her fault. All that old woman's fault." But deep down, he knew it was his own greed and cruelty that had dragged him to the bottom. Meanwhile, Emma lived in another kind of prison. She wasn't behind bars, but the weight of public shame crushed her everywhere she went. At the market, people pointed, "There she is, the ungrateful daughter," the one who called her own mother a burden. At work, colleagues whispered and avoided her. Soon, she lost her job. Friends vanished. Even her in-laws rejected her. A daughter who betrays her own mother can never be a good wife. Cast out, she rented a damp, dingy room, scraping by on odd jobs. At night, she sat in darkness, clutching an old photo of us together when she was a child. Her tears fell as she whispered, "Mom, if only I hadn't stayed silent. If only I had stood up for you." But if only changes nothing. The wounds she left in my heart will never heal. John's days in prison stripped him of every ounce of pride. His hair turned gray in just months. His face aged a decade. At night, he lay on the cold iron bunk, staring at the stained ceiling as echoes tormented him. His own voice played over and over in his mind. "She won't live much longer. Soon, everything will be mine. If you keep seeing that lawyer, I'll make sure you stay silent forever." He jolted awake, drenched in sweat, whispering to himself, "Just a dream, just a dream." But reality was a stone wall, cold and unbreakable. He had nothing left, no career, no friends, no freedom. What haunted him most wasn't the sentence, but my eyes in that courtroom. The eyes of a mother he had mocked and betrayed, no longer afraid, only filled with contempt and resolve. For the first time in his life, John realized how small and filthy he truly was. Meanwhile, Emma lived like a shadow. Her rented room, damp and moldy, felt more like a self-made prison. Each morning, she looked into the cracked mirror, staring at the hollow-eyed woman she had become, and every time, she heard her own words echo back, slicing into her heart. "She's nothing but a burden." That sentence, once uttered with a mocking smile, now returned as a blade cutting deeper every night. At her part-time job in a diner, customers whispered when they recognized her, "Isn't that the daughter of Francis, the woman who won the case?" "Yeah, the ungrateful one. Makes me sick." Emma's hands trembled, nearly dropping trays. Co-workers avoided her like she was contagious. At night, she clutched an old photograph of herself as a child on my lap, smiling in a white dress. That little girl had once promised, "Mom, I'll love you forever. I'll take care of you for life." But that promise had been broken beyond repair. Sometimes in her dreams, she saw me standing in her dingy room, thin and tearful, asking, "Emma, you promised never to leave me, so why did you?" She woke screaming, drenched in tears, whispering into the darkness, "Mom, I'm sorry. I was weak. I was wrong." But the silence never answered back. John in prison and Emma in the outside world both were shackled by the same chains, regret and memory. One rainy afternoon, Emma sat trembling at a rickety table in her rented room. A blank sheet of paper lay before her, the pen shaking in her hand. At last, she began to write. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was blind. I let that man lead me into betraying you. I know I no longer deserve to call you mother. But if you can, please forgive me just once." Her tears fell, smudging the ink until the words blurred. She folded the letter into an envelope and, with trembling hands, delivered it through the post. Then she lingered outside my gate, her face pale, before slipping away unseen. Days later, the letter returned to her, unopened. On the envelope, in stark black ink, were just 3 words: "Refused by recipient." Emma collapsed onto the floor, clutching the envelope to her chest, sobbing until her body shook. She knew the door back to me had closed forever. Meanwhile, John was trapped in his own hell behind bars. Night after night, he woke screaming from nightmares. He dreamed of me walking into his cell, my face calm but cold, my eyes staring straight through him. In the dream, I never spoke. I only turned away, leaving him to beg, "Don't go. I'm sorry. I regret everything." But I always vanished into the shadows, leaving him crumpled in despair. By day, he tried to drown himself in prison labor, but no amount of work could erase the memories. He saw, over and over, the moments of kindness I had once shown, the warm meals, the gentle smile, the words, "Eat, son. This house is your home too." And then he saw how he had spat on that kindness, how he had reduced me to a burden. The guilt gnawed at him until his eyes were hollow and sleepless, his hair white, his body bent like an old man before his time. The guards whispered, "That one is haunted by his own conscience." Emma outside, John inside, both lived as prisoners. One was shackled by regret, the other by his own nightmares. After all the storms, I finally learned how to breathe freely again. The day the verdict was handed down, I didn't feel triumph or revenge. I felt a quiet peace, as if, after years under darkness, the sun had finally risen. The house, once a battleground, was returned to me. But I no longer saw it as property. I saw it as proof that I had survived. I cleaned each room, polished every window. The keepsakes of my late husband that remained, I placed gently on the shelves, as though he was still watching over me. Each morning, I opened the windows wide and filled my lungs with fresh air. Birds sang, sunlight poured across the porch. For the first time in years, I felt alive, not just existing, but living. Neighbors came by with vegetables, bowls of hot porridge, and warm smiles. They squeezed my hands. "Frances, you are strong. We admire you." Tears welled in my eyes. I had thought myself utterly alone, but I discovered kindness was still all around me. I began joining local volunteer groups, cooking meals for the homeless, tutoring children on weekends. At the orphanage, little hands clutched mine and bright eyes looked up. "Grandma Frances, tell us a story." I told them fairy tales. I even hummed the same lullabies I had once sung to Emma. Their laughter filled the halls, and my heart, for so long heavy with grief, felt light again. One little girl asked softly, "Grandma, don't you feel lonely living by yourself?" I stroked her hair and smiled. "No, my dear. I have so many grandchildren now like you." It wasn't just to comfort her. It was the truth. I had lost one daughter, but I had gained dozens of grandchildren. I had lost blood ties, but found love without condition. As I sat on my porch at sunset, listening to children's laughter in the distance, I understood. Freedom and peace do not come from money or promises. They come from a soul unburdened. That night, under the golden glow of a lamp, I wrote in my journal with a steady hand, "I have walked through the storm, and I am still here." I no longer waited for apologies from John or Emma. I knew they were already serving their own life sentences, John in his nightmares, Emma in her regret. Instead, I wanted my story to be a reminder. Family is not defined by blood. Family is respect. Family is love. Without respect, blood ties are nothing but chains. Without love, kinship is an empty shell. I once thought my life would end in humiliation, but even at 70, life gave me a second chance. Before I closed my journal, I wrote one final line. Never call your loved ones a burden, because the moment you do, it is you who loses everything. The autumn wind carried the scent of chrysanthemums through the open window. I closed my eyes, finally at peace. You followed my story from the very beginning, from the moment I overheard my daughter laugh and call me nothing but a burden, through the tears, the betrayal, the courtroom battles, and finally to justice. But remember, this is not only my tragedy. This is a warning for everyone. Family has meaning only when it is nurtured with respect and love. Blood alone is not enough. If you believe family can never betray you, think again. If you believe blood is everything, ask yourself, what about love? And if you think my story has already shown you enough heartbreak and shock, then prepare yourself. Because what I am about to tell you next will leave you even more shaken. Stay with me because you will not want to miss it.